In today's video, I'm reading from this rather handsome book, Tales of Norse Mythology by Helen Greuber, of which I'll include a link to her wiki page below, and let you draw your own conclusions on the merits of the following chapter regarding Hel, Loki's offspring. Hel, goddess of death, was the daughter of Loki, god of evil, and of the giantess Angerboda, the portender of ill. She came into the world in a dark cave in Jotunheim together with the serpent Jormungandr and the terrible Fenris wolf, the trio being considered as the emblems of pain, sin, and death. Now Loki comes, cause of all ill, men and Aesir curse him still. Long shall the gods deplore, even till time be o'er, his base fraud on Asgard's hill. While deep in Jotunheim most fell are Fenrir, serpent, and dread Hel. Pain, sin, and death his children free, brought up and cherished, thro' them he, tormentor of the world shall be. And that's from Valhalla by J.C. Jones. In due time, Odin became aware of the terrible brood which Loki was cherishing and resolved, as we have already seen, to banish them from the face of the earth. The serpent was therefore cast into the sea, where his writhing was supposed to cause the most terrible tempests. The wolf Fenris was secured in chains, thanks to the dauntless Tyr, and Hel, or Hela, the goddess of death, was hurled into the depths of Niflheim, where Odin gave her power over the 9 worlds. Hela into Niflheim thou threwst, and gavest her 9 unenlightened worlds to rule, a queen and empire over all the dead. From Balder Dead by Matthew Arnold. Hel's kingdom in Niflheim, this realm, which was supposed to be situated under the earth, could only be entered after a painful journey over the roughest roads in the cold, dark regions of the extreme north. The gate was so far from all human abode that even Hermod the Swift, mounted upon Sleipnir, had to journey 9 long nights ere he reached the river Gjöll. This formed the boundary of Niflheim, over which was thrown a bridge of crystal arched with gold, hung on a single hair, and constantly guarded by the grim skeleton Modgud, who made every spirit pay a toll of blood ere she would allow it to pass. The bridge of glass hung on a hair, thrown o'er the river terrible, the Gjöll, boundary of Hel. Now here the maiden Modgud stood, waiting to take the toll of blood, a maiden horrible to sight, fleshless, with shroud and pall bedight. From Valhalla by J.C. Jones. The spirits generally rode or drove across this bridge on the horses, or in the wagons which had been burned upon the funeral pyre with the dead to serve that purpose. And the northern races were very careful to bind upon the feet of the departed a specially strong pair of shoes called hell shoes, that they might not suffer during the long journey over rough roads. Soon after the Gjöll bridge was passed, the spirit reached the ironwood, which stood none but bare and iron-leaf trees, and passing through it reached Hellgate, beside which the fierce, blood-stained dog Garm kept watch, cowering in a dark hole known as Nipper Cave. This monster's rage could only be appeased by the offering of a hell cake, which never failed those who had ever given bread to the needy. Loud bays Garm before the Nipper Cave, from Sayerman's Edda, Thorpe translation. Within the gate, amid the intense cold and impenetrable darkness, was heard the seething of the great cauldron Hvergelmir, the rolling of the glaciers in the Elivaga and other streams of hell, among which were the Leipta by which solemn oaths were sworn, and the slid in which turbid waters' naked swords continually rolled. Further on in this gruesome place was Elvidna, misery, the hall of the goddess Hel, whose dish was hunger. Her knife was greed. Idleness was the name of her man, sloth of her maid, ruin of her threshold, sorrow of her bed, and conflagration of her curtains. Elvidna was Hels Hall, iron-barred with massive wall, horrible that palace tall. Hunger was her table bare, waste her knife, her bed sharp care. Burning anguish spread her feast, bleached bones arrayed each guest. Plague and famine sang their runes, mingled with despair's harsh tunes. Misery and agony e'er in hell's abode shall be. From Valhalla by J.C. Jones. This goddess had many different abodes for the guests who daily came to her, for she received not only perjurers and criminals of all kinds, but also those who were unfortunate enough to die without shedding blood. To her realm also were consigned those who died of old age or disease, a mode of decease which was contemptuously called straw death, as the beds of the people were generally of that material. Tempered hard by frost, tempest, and toil their nerves, the sons of those whose only terror was a bloodless death. Thompson. Although the innocent were treated kindly by hell and enjoyed a state of negative bliss, it is no wonder that the inhabitants of the north shrank from the thought of visiting her cheerless abode. And while the men preferred to mark themselves with the spear point, to hurl themselves down from a precipice, or to be burned ere life was quite extinct, the women did not shrink from equally heroic measures. In the extremity of their sorrow, they did not hesitate to fling themselves down a mountainside, or fall upon the swords which were given them at their marriage, so that their bodies might be burned with those whom they loved, and their spirits released to join them in the bright home of the gods. Further horrors, however, awaited those whose lives had been criminal or impure. These spirits being banished to the strand of corpses, where they waded in ice-cold streams of venom, through a cave made of wattled serpents, whose poisonous fangs were turned towards them. After suffering untold agonies there, they were washed down into the cauldron Hvergelmir, where the serpent Nidhugg ceased for a moment gnawing the root of the tree Yggdrasil to feed upon their bones. A hall standing far from the sun in Nastrond, indoors are northward turned, venom drops fall in through its apertures. Entwined is that hall with serpents' backs. She there saw wading the sluggish streams bloodthirsty men and perjurers, and him who the ear beguiles of another's wife. There Nidhogg sucks the corpses of the dead. From Salmon's Edda, Thorpe translation. Hel herself was supposed occasionally to leave her dismal abode to range the earth upon her three-legged white horse. and in times of pestilence or famine, if a part of the inhabitants of a district escaped, she was said to use a rake, and when whole villages and provinces were depopulated, as in the case of the historical epidemic of the Black Death, it was said that she had ridden with a broom. The northern races further fancied that the spirits of the dead were sometimes allowed to revisit the earth and appear to their relatives whose sorrow or joy affected them even after death, as is related in the Danish ballad of Ager and Elsa, where a dead lover bids his sweetheart smile, so that his coffin may be filled with roses instead of the clotted blood drops produced by her tears. Listen now, my good Sir Ager, dearest bridegroom, all I crave is to know how it goes with thee in that lonely place, the grave. Every time that thou rejoicest and art happy in thy mind, are my lonely grave's recesses all with leaves of roses lined. Every time that love thou grievest and dost shed the briny flood, are my lonely grave's recesses filled with black and lonesome, loathsome blood. The Ballad of Ager and Elsa, Longfellow's translation. And that is what the author has to say about hell in her book. As said, a wiki link to the author will be down below, and you may comment on this if you wish. Perhaps the true horror is what is written so long ago, and perhaps you think differently or have experienced something differently. May you enjoy the night tonight, and I'll see you in my next video. Thank you very much. Take care.